As a new journalist, I had to get to Brazil when I was based out of Prague with Project Syndicate, and I didn't know I needed a visa. And I would therefore got deported from Brazil as soon as I arrived, which was very traumatic. And I learned from my boss, and I thought I was going to be fired and chewed out, that these things happen. And he urged me to go have a drink and get a hotel room. And, I was going through an ordeal. And I learned, about the value of humanity. I was a young person at that time. I had only done, a variety of other jobs, but I'd experienced kind of, really difficult bosses who yelled and screamed and was kind of conditioned to that. So seeing that sort of humanity at an early side showed me the difference that could make when someone messes up by giving them, kind of a hug in some sense, as opposed to a slap.
This week, I'm joined by a corporate spy, consultant and speaker. His name is Jeremy Hurewitz, and we will be talking about rapport building, understanding and managing your emotions, some of the secrets, myths, maybe not many secrets, mostly myths and misconceptions around the world of espionage, corporate and otherwise. And perhaps most importantly for leaders, whether you're new or experienced, how to still build rapport, how to continue working productively with people you just don't really like.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Jeremy, welcome to Leading with Integrity. Great to have you on the show. Looking forward to what I'm sure is going to be a very interesting conversation today.
Thanks for having me, David.
Yeah, well, again, thanks for being here. So I'm going to push you in the deep end a little bit. Tell us a bit about yourself, your career so far, what you do today, and why you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll try to keep it brief, though it's a little bit of a long and winding road, I suppose. After I finished university, I went overseas with a backpack and a guitar, and I just tried to, have a little bit of a life of adventure. And I think that's what I got. I spent about a decade overseas, got into the world of journalism, wrote on a freelance basis for that decade based out of Prague and Shanghai. And I'm also quite proud of having built and ran the newspaper association Project Syndicate, which remains an influential group today. Coming back to my native New York, I've been in corporate consulting for nearly 20 years, mostly in the space of corporate security and intelligence, which I do a lot of work on still today. I'm an advisor to the firm Interfor International. And I describe the industry as the biggest industry that no one's ever heard of because it's full of people who discretion is a calling card of their career, whether it's spies, special forces, Secret Service, but it quietly influences the world of foreign policy and business in a huge way. So I've worked as a corporate spy, you could say. I still do so, and I still write quite a bit. During COVID, I said, you know what, I'm ready to kind of, really do a lot more writing. And I had this idea for Sell Like a Spy for a number of years, kind of germinating in the background, working with former case officers and observing the amazing skills they have. And then also working with a variety of others, in particular, FBI hostage negotiators come to mind. I worked in the space of kidnapped for ransom consulting as well. So I got to see that the amazing skills that they bring to bear, and I started writing about it. And so the book came out a little over a year ago, and I continue to speak around the country, keynote speeches at conferences and such, and I do trainings for teams. I'm working on some other books and stuff. So that's a bit about me.
Okay, very cool. So I'm interested to know how you went from the journalism into corporate espionage, because that feels like a bit of a leap to me, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, well, I came back to New York and decided I was ready to make a shift from the media. I was curious about where the skills I had cultivated over that decade abroad would fit in. And I found this world of corporate security and intelligence, and I found it intriguing. So I jumped right in, and while most people in this industry come from government backgrounds, they do welcome journalists because of the investigative skills we have, because sometimes we have experience in markets our clients are interested in. And my experience in China was very relevant in the late 2000s and through the 2010s. And I suppose up through today, though the investment climate has soured in China. So, there was a nice match there. I do get why it could sound a little strange, but it actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, now that you mention it, I can see quite a few like mutual skills, let's say, like the building the relationships, the cultivating sources, that whole side of it. I guess that's pretty useful skills to have in both worlds,
Absolutely.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting. So you just came across it. What did you just put in a job application like any other job? Is that how it works? Or
No, I mean, like, a lot of things in life, it was about, connections and using your network. There was somebody at a major sports league who used to be, I think, a member of the Secret Service. I had a connection to that person. He gave me some advice, started mentioning a few of the different companies, the players who I had never heard of. And I believe I just applied cold to a certain job and wound up getting it.
wow. Okay. Well, there's hope
Yeah.
for us all then. So, I mean, there might be a really obvious question to this, an answer to this question. It might be a stupid question, but what's the difference between the word of like the corporate espionage and what most people would have in their mind when they think of the word spy?
Well, most of the what we could call corporate espionage that I engage in is, what you might describe as reputational background checks. So I'm certainly not, sneaking into offices and taking pictures of sensitive documents with little cameras. That's not what I mean. What I do and what I write about in the book is, get people to open up to me about, a subject I'm investigating. So, David, if you're the CEO of a company that a private equity firm is buying and they want to understand some of the basics, like, hey, do you have a criminal record? Did you really graduate from the university you said you did? Do you have massive debt? Or those kind of things. We start with looking at that, to find out details about somebody. And then where I tend to get involved is the human intelligence side. So I'll reach out to people who used to work with you, who maybe served on boards with you, might have been in litigation against you, and I'll get details on, how you perform under pressure, whether you're an ethical person, what people working with you think about. And these are, qualitative details that really matter when a private equity firm, for instance, as I'm describing, makes a $100 million acquisition in a company and is deciding whether to keep the CEO or not. So, that's the most frequent thing I do. I do get involved with strategic investors like hedge funds and others to kind of what I describe as narrow an information gap. We might not be able to put a bullseye on every assignment we have, but we can typically reduce the information gap that an investor has so they can make a good decision.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so there's some easy answers there, but some that probably wouldn't occur to most people. So thank you for that. And you've probably just covered quite a few of these anyway, but are there any other like misconceptions about spies that you'd like to debunk now?
Well, I actually don't think I hit some of the most important ones, which I kind of start every talk or training with, because I always feel that we have to level set about spies to learn from them. Because look, I enjoy, and I'm a big consumer of, in fact, Hollywood fare on spies, or wherever they are overseas. I watch overseas spy stuff quite a bit too, TV films and spy novels. And a lot of them are sensationalized accounts of what espionage is. Spies are not typically engaged in gunfights and car chases and seduction. Spies are experts at developing relationships. So I like to describe them as, relationship managers. And, it's been a great thing for me to describe spies as the world's best salespeople, as I do. And so many case officers have instantly intuited that and said, yes, you're absolutely right. We're making a sale. We're connecting with people. We're trying to, establish a relationship and make the most difficult sale in the world, which is convincing someone to buy into treason. In many ways, spies, case officers, if you will, consider the agents that they recruit as the actual spies. They're more the relationship manager. The agent is the one getting the documents, taking the, photos, providing the intelligence on the ground. So, really, this resonates in the corporate world, because if you're a salesperson, a relationship manager, or even internal communications, a lot of these things really resonate because it's about relationships, it's about communication, and it's about emotional intelligence.
And that feels like a really good place to ask a follow-up question about your book and what selling like a spy is all about. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, so like a spy is, again, about that idea that spies are the world's best salespeople. And, what I say to people is that, let's face it, unless your product or service is totally differentiated in the market, or you have a price point that blows competitors out of the water, relationships really matter. I know every company wants to think they're different, but in most instances, you have competitors that do something very similar to what you do. So, you have to lean on, human behavior, human relationships. People want to buy from those that they like. People want to spend time with those that make them feel good. So, in an undifferentiated market, they might choose me over you, David, if I have made them laugh, if I have made them feel comfortable, if I have made them feel listened to. So these are key details. They're very subtle, but they can make all the difference. So I have a lot of tips in the book on, relationship development. I have details on negotiation, from the world of FBI hostage negotiators, skills on diffusing challenging emotional encounters, and then other outside the box ideas on relationship development, how to accentuate different sides of your personality, how to lean into, your passions that can open up hidden doors in your career and in your everyday life. How to, go to where clients are in a more unconventional way than kind of your typical networking, as spies do. And I try to thread the narrative with, rich and compelling anecdotes from the world of government service. And hopefully I've succeeded at that.
Well, no doubt. And consider it on my Christmas list as well. So I'll let you know.
Great.
So one of the things that I know you mentioned in the book is this phrase like emotion trumps cognition. And I found that quite an intriguing one when I saw it in your profile. So, I mean, it's relevant, I think, in the sales world. I think it's also relevant for leaders, for anyone in any relationship potentially, but certainly in the context of the workplace, those kind of emotional encounters, the confrontations. So can you share maybe some of your methods or your tips on how you can de-escalate those sort of situations and get the most from them without blowing up the relationship, hopefully?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So these come from FBI and other law enforcement and special forces who, are in life and death situations and have to use these. But they're very compelling strategies for everyday life and our careers as well. Emotion trumps cognition. I mean, how many times have you been in a heated argument and then later said, I wish I said this one thing. Why didn't I say it? It was so obvious. It's because your mind is choked with the emotion and you don't think as well. So, one of the best things you can try to do is calm down. And there's a lot of details about like breathing and things you can go through, but I'm focused a little more outwardly on how to calm the situation and deal with the other side. So, when I train teams and talk with leaders, if you have somebody who comes into your office and is super upset about something, the first thing you want to do is invite that person to sit down, and if they won't sit down, don't stand up and meet them. That will raise the temperature in the room. The next thing is to really let that person fully unburden themselves. Don't interrupt them. You might be really busy. You might think what they're saying is nonsense. You might be able to prove it's nonsense by interrupting them. But if you value the relationship, let that person fully unburden themselves, because it will calm them if they can speak until they're finished. There are other strategies I write about too, like inviting them to be a stakeholder in the solution. What do you think we should do here? And that leads to certain kind of A/B paths. Sometimes they might say something totally outrageous. This person should be fired, or the police should be called. And then they might realize after they say that outrageous thing how it sounds, and that deflates them too. It might make them feel a little bit more responsible, as another scenario there, and then you can start a dialogue. So those are a couple things. One of my mentors that I write about in the book, Gary Nessner, who's well known for his work on the Waco hostage situation. His book his memoir is called Stalling for Time. And in many ways, these hostage sieges take so long because they want to let that emotion, kind of dissipate a little bit. So if you're dealing with someone and you're not getting to the resolution based on a few of these ideas and others I talk about in my book, you call a timeout. You say, look, whether it's a spouse, a colleague, hey, how about we talk about this, in an hour or two? Or how about we circle back tomorrow on this and just both think over what we've shared here? And it will almost always be a better conversation at that time. And then finally, I won't use, I don't know your standards here, but I'll keep my language somewhat censored. One of my favorite notes is if you're dealing with someone on the street, it's not necessarily your close relationship or, a colleague, but if someone's really upset, what you want to do is step back and say, is it an F this or F you situation? If it's about F this, it's the situation, well, then there are things you can probably do together. If it's F you, and they're targeted specifically at you, then you have to think about, extricating yourself, self-defense. So, having frameworks for dealing with these intense emotional encounters can help you to manage your emotions and lead to a better outcome.
I think it's one of those things, it's way too common, isn't it, in the average workplace, I fear. But probably everyone can identify with that kind of heated conversation moment, let's say. Certainly, at least I hope not to the extremes that we're talking about in the spy world, but it is interesting. And I find a lot of the advice about it focuses very much on how to manage yourself and your own emotions, which, don't get me wrong, is very valuable. But also it's only addressing half of the conversation at best, isn't it? And so I think that's why some of the steps you've just talked about are actually really useful, because it's helping you manage the situation and the other side of that confrontation as well, which I don't hear a lot, if I'm honest.
Yeah, agreed. I'm trying to provide, outside the box ideas, not just reiterate some of the other kind of standard bromides about, corporate communications.
Even the simple things like controlling your breathing, I mean, that's really useful. And it's a great tool to manage your own emotions. I mean, I've used that and wished I'd had it, years back in that really bad argument I had with my boss that time. Why didn't I know about this at the time? That whole thing. But yeah, as I say, it's only half the battle, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Breathing's so essential.
Slight tangent, although maybe in the same vein. Something else that I think is a kind of a truism of the workplace is we're all going to, and life in general, sooner or later, we're all going to have to encounter someone we don't like very much. And in a work setting, it's a lot harder to take the obvious course of just, okay, well, I just won't see that person, because you don't have a choice, do you? So what advice can you offer from your experiences on how we can overcome that kind of, I don't like this person mindset, still form a connection to get the work done or whatever it is?
Yeah.
And kind of get past that.
Yep, that's the heart of the matter in many ways. There's a quote that's attributed to Abraham Lincoln, who supposedly said, I don't like that person, I must get to know him better. And that's a really great touchstone for how spies think about things. So one of my favorite quotes from a former case officer in the book is, every good intelligence officer has a real bond with their target on some level and in some regard. So these are real relationships. And the reason I highlight that is because, stepping back, spies don't get to recruit people they would probably otherwise choose to spend time with. They very frequently have to recruit criminals, terrorists, diplomats from some of the most repressive and odious regimes around the world. And in order to overcome their, obvious, issues with people's moralities or values or whatever it might be, they have to practice what I call radical empathy, or sometimes referred to as tactical empathy. And the idea here is that, I estimate it, kind of casually, that 99% of humanity has some redeeming quality to them if you work hard enough to try to find. There's very few people that are just all 100% through and through kind of evil and have nothing that you can't dig up that you can try to connect to. So you have to be patient, and you have to leverage many of the skills I write about. It starts with active listening. It starts with really letting that person talk. It includes leveraging intellectual curiosity, which the CIA screens for and then trains their case officers in, because it all has to be a process in getting to know the person, putting aside your compunctions about them and trying to find an area of connectivity. It's the criminal that's a devoted family man. It's the terrorist that practices acts of charitable good. It's about, the Iranian diplomat who actually loves recreational basketball, and so do you. So, it's about finding that area of connectivity, and there's usually something there. So you have to work at it.
I don't know if it's a thing of human nature or maybe just like modern society, but I think we're very, very quick, aren't we, to just put people in that I don't like that person box, so I'm not going to try.
Absolutely.
But hearing you talk about that, like if spies can find something to connect with like terrorists on, then the rest of us should be able to manage that guy in the office who didn't make my coffee right that time or whatever it is. Like,
well said. I mean, people are conditioned to seek comfort, and that's why on the other side of it, we should try to be that person that provides that comfort. And I offered a lot of thoughts on that. But on the other side, you have to, if it's somebody that you need to connect with, and getting beyond your career stuff, it's, what if you dislike your mother-in-law or your brother-in-law? You're gonna, if you care about your spouse, you're gonna have to deal with that person, and trying to leverage these skills in your everyday life will help you refine them for the business world as well. But yeah, we automatically kind of recoil from people that we don't connect with, that don't seem to respect us or treat us as we think we should. But there's a whole world of connectivity and learning from trying to overcome that and connecting with those people.
There's a lot of cliches on there around, it might be more difficult, but nothing worthwhile is easy is the one that immediately pops into my mind.
True.
You feel free to say no, because you may not be able to tell many stories, but is there like a story from your career in this world that you're maybe most proud of, or that's your coolest story that you'd like to share?
Well, I don't know. For some reason, this just came to mind, but I was working on a case. I probably have to keep the details quite obscure, but it's not common for me, but there was a murder case that I was working on. And we were working for the defense counsel, who it was all over the media, and the person was being described as, upstanding and a moral person. And the defense counsel was quite aware that this person had a much shadier past. There were only a few people who really knew about that, and they were not inclined to speak to lawyers. And so I was able to connect with one of those people and pull out information about how that individual was involved in selling drugs, in prostitution, in other morally dubious situations, and give the legal counsel some avenues to kind of prove that. So, that's just something that came to mind recently. Obviously, again, can't talk a lot about it, but in other instances, I'm able to, find out that, hey, a senior executive is going to maybe get this job, but they're concerned because that person had 2 DWIs in the span, that's driving while intoxicated. I know you're in the UK. I don't know if you use the same acronyms, in the span of, say, 8 months. And, the client's concerned about that. And I was able to speak to people who let me know that they were going through a, really difficult time. I don't remember if it was a divorce or something with their kids, but a difficult personal time. And they came out of it, and they're, much admired by their colleagues and considered to be a great leader. So it feels good when you're able to pull intelligence out that doesn't kind of derail somebody's career, but actually helps somebody who has struggled overcome it and, pull through with flying colors.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's a tough one, that particularly that second example, because you're not really supposed to hold that sort of thing against people, are you? But also, I can see how, particularly in an investor scenario, they probably would like to know about that sort of thing, wouldn't they? So,
yeah, agreed.
That is a tough one. Changing tack a little bit. One of the things I think that new managers, in particular, new leaders, first timers, really struggle with is that process of building that rapport with these people that they're now responsible for. Either way, whether they're coming into a new team from the outside or whether they're now leading former colleagues, there are challenges around both of those scenarios. Are there any other tips or techniques that you could share that you maybe haven't mentioned already that would help someone in that situation?
A couple of things come to mind. I'll share one here. It depends on, obviously, the atmospherics and everything, and you need to use emotional intelligence to discern that. But if you're somebody new coming in, and maybe you're slightly intimidating, you're the new CEO, you have a big background, you can tell that your new colleagues are a little wary as they're getting to know you. Well, one of the really powerful ways of connecting is vulnerability. And, vulnerability breeds intimacy, and humanity breeds credibility. So making yourself vulnerable taps deeply into behavioral science. I like to say that not all of us experience tragedy, but all of us understand misfortune. So we deeply want to relate to people. And I often share a very personal story about how a little over a decade ago, I had a brain tumor. It was benign, but the long and complex removal of it, took the hearing from my right ear. So I'm deaf on my right side. And, that creates a dynamic where I'm always trying to sit with you on my left, or if we're walking, I keep you on my left. And I oftentimes have to explain that. And I've oftentimes had to do so in a business setting when someone is keeping me at a distance and maybe they think I'm pitching them. And what I tell people is that every time I've ever shared this, and I could even see it on your reaction, David, it triggers empathy, right? It triggers a connection, and it narrows an intimacy gap. So if you're a leader, you don't have to talk about everybody has a different set of circumstances to share. But even as a leader, you might say something like, taking on this new company and getting to know everybody here is a huge challenge. I've oftentimes find myself overwhelmed. So making yourself vulnerable and sharing, hey, I'm just human, just like you, is a really great tactic. And spies use it all the time. I have a story in my book about how, one case officer in the Middle East would frequently share that he had a child on the autism spectrum. And that led people who he would subsequently recruit as agents to draw closer to him and talk about their families as well. So, and that's behavioral science. When we share something, people tend to respond to things in kind. So it's a really worthwhile tactic. But you have to demonstrate emotional intelligence about when you use it and what you use, But, I would urge people to dig in and, take off their business armor occasionally and make themselves vulnerable.
Absolutely agree with that. I think it's that trust word, isn't it, that comes up a lot. We're always talking about trust, I feel like. And I've always been of the view that the leader has to be the first to trust. And I think that's why vulnerability, like you've described, is so powerful, because you're not just trusting first, but you're trusting with potentially something really personal, or that you maybe, at least in the traditional expectation of leaders, people don't expect to hear that sort of thing. And it works for a reason, doesn't it? Yeah.
So I've seen it work. Daily, I see it work.
Yeah. But I agree as well. You've got to read the room, haven't you? You've got to understand the context. I think you have to get to know people a little bit first, because there's a danger, isn't there, if you share the wrong thing, or it's taken, the tone's not quite right, or it's out of context, and it can be more damaging than helpful. I was trying to think of an example, but there's someone I used to work with had obviously read a management book somewhere about vulnerability. So they would come in and just brain dump once a week about whatever happened to them last week, or this big hardship they had when they'd just shown up 2 weeks ago in a new car or something. And you could see around the room, the faces just like, oh yeah, all right, yeah, loads of sympathy for you, that big paycheck and not working as hard as the rest of us. And so, you've got to be a little bit self-aware with it as well, I think. It is a balancing act.
I have a friend who is just building an enormous beach mansion, and it's riddled with problems. And, I have to urge him to tell me what's going on. And he's self-aware. And he's like, look, nobody wants to hear about my problems building my giant house, So that, you're right. It can be emotionally read wrong. So you have to be careful about these things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a weird one, isn't it? Because I think without the leadership dynamic there, it's maybe not such an issue. But I think when there's that difference in status, if you like, even if it's just a perceived one, it can be a real minefield.
Agreed.
Yeah. So I think that segues us nicely into leadership itself, doesn't it? So if you had to choose maybe one or two of the biggest leadership lessons from your whole career so far, what would that be?
Well, one I saw early in my career, but then I write about it in my book because, I was, there's a section on leadership, and I talk a lot with some incredible generals, including some super well-known ones that have supported the book, like General Stanley McChrystal. And what they come back to, and what I saw earlier in my career, is that it is a sign of intelligence, it is a sign of great leadership, and it is a sign of wisdom to listen to your team. Bad leaders think they know everything and that everybody should just hop to it when they say go. And good leaders listen to their team and understand that those on the ground often have a perspective that they don't have. And the leader has a certain other perspective, of course, too. But I find that, ego-driven leaders don't understand that. And there's details in my book about, again, life and death missions where, in Afghanistan, there was a situation where they wanted to capture a Pashtun leader who they thought was involved with both the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. And the special forces guys on the ground who were dealing with that tribe said, if we snatch this guy, there will be a bloodbath. And but it seemed like it was going to come down that order. And instead, a general intervened and said, look, how do you think we should figure this out? And they determined that this Pashtun leader actually had some serious health issues. And they went to him and said, hey, if we can get you to a, truly advanced Western hospital, would that be of interest to you? And we would love to kind of chat with you about a variety of factors going on. And the leader was delighted to have this advanced medical care. They took him to an aircraft carrier, on the ocean, as best I remember. And they were able to ask him questions, not in an interrogation method with him in handcuffs, but in a more casual way that, not casual, but in a way that leveraged the emotional intelligence we're talking about here. And nobody was killed and they got the information they needed. So it's really about listening to your team on the ground. Those are one of the important leadership lessons that I've learned. And I always kind of shake my head when I hear about leaders that, the rest of the team is so incredibly frustrated. They don't listen to people. They rule by edict. It doesn't work.
Yeah, it's one of my great frustrations in the field, actually, of leadership is like how prevalent even now those autocrats approaches are. And I think I know like the reasons why. It's a whole combination of things, one of which being it's easily understood and it's what most people's own bosses have done in the past. So they think that's how it's done and they just copy and paste. But there's so many better ways of doing it. And it's not like they're not well understood anymore.
Yeah, agreed.
But, yeah, it's interesting though. I love that story as well about finding alternative routes through and listening to the people with the most knowledge. And it reminds me of, must be 2 years ago now, a previous guest who spent a lot of time in like the Formula One world. And he worked for one of the big teams, and one of their big kind of internal, I guess, values really was about making decisions at that point of most knowledge. Because even in that like massively high-tech world where everything is a data feed and you can call all of it up at your fingertips at any moment, you're still not going to have the same knowledge as the person who's fitting the wheel to the car or whatever. And they're the person best placed to know, like, does the wheel fit, for example?
Yeah, agreed.
So yeah, that's a big lesson in leadership for me, and listening, of course. Yeah, at every level. I'm naturally suspicious, if you like, of those leaders who walk into the meeting and have to be the first one to talk, and that they are there to transmit, and that's it. And you're just like, nah, you should be the last person to talk.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, the ego is a drug, and many corporate leaders are drunk on it. And I think the best leaders, the most effective ones, are great listeners as well. Which I like to say, everything flows from being a good listener. Everything that I teach, and it's very difficult, and there are a lot of reasons why: behavioral science, evolution, but that is an important thing.
Yeah, I mean, ego is definitely an issue for a lot of people. I think as well, though. It's one of these myths of leadership, isn't it? That's what people think leaders are supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think most of them are doing it maliciously, maybe subconsciously out of ego, perhaps. But I think most of them are just doing it because they genuinely believe this is the way it's done. This is the right way to do it.
Agreed.
Which, again, is really frustrating, isn't it?
Sure is.
Yeah. I mean, on that note, we've probably mentioned them all already, but what would you say are like the most common mistakes that you see leaders make, and how can we avoid them?
The one I'm kind of, talking about these days, in particular because of our dynamic in the U.S. right now, which is unfortunate, is that, you can make a case that diversity initiatives, DE&I kind of went too far. I'm not going to handle that. But the fact that we can't really talk about diversity anymore without, drawing the U.S. government's anger is ridiculous. And I think that it's going to set us back because we were making progress in trying to create diverse teams, which are stronger teams. And not because of quotas, but because the CIA and other organizations know that diverse teams make less mistakes. There's less blind spots. And again, back to, behavioral science, evolution, we seek comfort. So if I'm interviewing, I'm naturally inclined to hire somebody who looks like me, sounds like me, has a background like me. It brings me comfort. I think, I'll be able to work better with that person. But like this idea of a team of rivals or bringing people in who aren't like you, and having a little bit of discomfort is where growth can happen. And in a corporate setting, it will help you have less blind spots. There will be less of a chance that you will make some egregious issue concerning race or, other group because you don't have that representation on your team. And it will lead to creativity. McChrystal talks about how, it's a small element of diversity, but I think it's an important one. When they used to run, commando missions and they had to do some kind of reconnaissance and act a little bit undercover first, if you send, two heavily muscled late 30s men and the only difference between them is one is blonde and one is brown, that could be a problem. Men think of things in a certain way. And they found that putting a man and a woman together, posing as a husband and wife, created a different dynamic. Security looks at them differently. Locals look at them differently. And women bring a different set of ideas about solving problems. So diverse teams are stronger teams. And I think leaders frequently make that mistake. And I think it's, I'll be talking about this at a conference in 2 weeks. I think AI is exacerbating that because we are now in environments where people are reviewing CVs, and if you don't have the exact requirements that they want you to have, you're filtered out. And I always say, and I'll be saying to this big conference group, hey, if I'm a case officer that just left the CIA after 10 years, and I'm literally, as I describe it, one of the world's best salespeople, and I can't get a business development job at your consulting company because I don't have, 10 years working in a consulting environment, I think that's a pity because you're going to lose somebody who might have incredible experience, unparalleled experience in relationship development, who deeply understands the sector they're working in because they were an undercover officer operating in that area for years. And might have a detailed knowledge of the emerging markets that your company is focused on. So I think AI can be a danger to reinforcing these biases as well.
100%. I think the problem with AI is not enough people care to understand how it works. And in situations like that, it's like it's its great strength in a lot of ways, but in that situation, it's a huge weakness, especially if you don't understand that it's a weakness. So you might just be trusting. I'm sure a lot of people are. But I mean, the way those models are built, they're just given loads and loads and loads of data. So if you're training it to filter CVs, so you give it the last 100 CVs of people you've hired, and they all just happen to, because of your unconscious bias, all look the same, sound the same, and come from more or less the same places, then that's what it will be looking for, because that's how AI works at the moment, at least, until it evolves again. So yeah, I mean, there's a huge danger in that, isn't there? And I'm sure hiring and diversity are not the only areas where that's a problem. Although I can't think of any others right now. But
yeah.
Yeah. And the point about the industry and the backgrounds as well is, I mean, not so long ago, we were hearing a lot about, particularly the big companies were actively hiring outside of their sector in order to address exactly that problem and get different ideas in different sets of experience. Not heard that talked about in a while now, though. Has that gone away? Like, have we given up on that idea? Was it not valuable?
I agree. There's a really good book called Range by David Epstein that I refer to in the epilogue of my book. And, a multidisciplinary approach, I think, is a really valuable one. So, and he talks a lot in that book about how, outsiders have often given some of the most incredible answers in the fields of science and different things. And now in our age of denigrating expertise, I don't want to pile on with that because experts are so important. And I lament kind of that age that we're living through. But I just want to highlight that multidisciplinary perspective and the different viewpoints on a team strengthen a team.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I agree. I also don't want to pile on the experts. You've got to have both in my book because you do need that established expertise who knows the ground rules of the technology or the industry or whatever it is, because there are always some, like in aviation, for example, there are certain things you must not do for safety reasons. And if you have never worked in aviation, you might not understand that. So you've got to have that expertise who has, in order to temper some of the more out there ideas of the other industry expertise or the outsider.
Agreed.
But as you say, like, that outsider view is also very important, because that same mindset of the expert, and I'm thinking back to my aerospace experience here in particular, you do get stuck in that loop very easily of, we've always done it this way, therefore we always will do it this way, which can be really difficult to break out of, especially when you've got things like the safety case as like your ultimate justification.
Yeah, agreed.
Another big high-profile one that comes to mind in recent years, this whole the Titan sub thing as well, on that particular aspect. And NASA have made that mistake as well, I think, a couple of times now. So it's not like I don't know. It's not like these things aren't well understood, and I don't know if diversity is the answer, but carrying on the same isn't, definitely. So,
yeah, I don't know if quotas are the answer. I think people will push back on that, but I think, the work I'm doing, I'm trying to push corporate teams to, think a little bit differently, to embrace diversity, not because of quotas or because of some woke agenda, but because it will make your team stronger.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know much about the quotas thing. I don't think that's really been an issue in the UK. I do know that there is one of these areas that gets very emotive and politicized, doesn't it? And I think, again, like AI, people don't take the time to understand what's actually the law. So here, for example, there used to be a lot of thing where it's kind of similar to the quotas thing, but people used to get really up in arms about positive discrimination, in inverted commas. And they'd kick off about, I shouldn't have to hire this person instead of the other person just because they've got a particular protected characteristic or other. But if you actually read the letter of the law, what it had always said was, it is legal to discriminate on the basis of a protected characteristic when you have two otherwise equal candidates, which is by no means the same.
Right.
Like, it's totally different. But anyway, that one always used to bug me. Okay, so moving on, we got dangerously close to politics there, didn't we?
We did. Let's steer away.
Yes, indeed. Well, I quite enjoy talking about it, but I know most listeners probably don't want to hear about it, so I try not to go on about it too much. In your entire career so far, what's your best memory of being led?
Best, there are a couple moments where bosses really made a big difference in my life. As a new journalist, I had to get to Brazil when I was based out of Prague with Project Syndicate, and I didn't know I needed a visa. And I would therefore got deported from Brazil as soon as I arrived, which was very traumatic. And I learned from my boss, and I thought I was going to be fired and chewed out, that these things happen. And he urged me to go have a drink and get a hotel room. And, I was going through an ordeal. And I learned, about the value of humanity. I was a young person at that time. I had only done, a variety of other jobs, but I'd experienced kind of, really difficult bosses who yelled and screamed and was kind of conditioned to that. So seeing that sort of like humanity at an early side showed me the difference that could make when someone messes up by giving them, kind of a hug in some sense, as opposed to a slap. So I learned that. And then, I had a great boss named Pat Donegan in a consulting environment, who was just very dynamic and was very good at showing his warmth, but was also very good at providing rigor. And those are, learning technical skills from a boss is something that I think is important. And every boss should leave their employees with, something that they learned. They should be passing on wisdom. But a boss is also really important, a leader, in creating esprit de corps and creating an environment in which creativity is rewarded, where hard work is rewarded, where it's fun. I guess everybody responds to different things, but I've never responded well to kind of a martinet and someone who's going to be such a disciplinarian and ruling by fear. I respond by being made a stakeholder, by working in an environment that feels dynamic, that feels fun, that feels fair. So both of the individuals I mentioned, and I didn't mention the name of the other person, Professor Andrzej Rapaczynski, these were leaders who taught me a lot in my life, and I benefited from their wisdom.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that sort of, especially in a situation like that where the individual has made a mistake. Like, they know they've made a mistake. They know they've made an oversight. They're having a terrible experience. You're not going to like make them remember it anymore by piling on and slapping them or whatever, verbally, hopefully.
No. And if there's something they've done too, you can maybe address that when they're less emotional too, right? Emotion trumps cognition. Just if they're a valuable member of the team and you don't intend to fire them full stop, get them to calm down, remind them that they're valued and everybody makes mistakes. And then you can diagnose what happened afterwards.
Absolutely. Yeah. And look at it more as a learning opportunity and use that sort of language as well. And make it not a kind of you and I, but more of a we conversation. Right. I think it's so easy. It's such an easy difference, isn't it? And yet again, like so few people do it as a first instinct. But the such a massive difference it can make in that how that person will remember you as a leader, see your story, but B, like the eventual outcome of that situation and probably your long-term working relationship, whether it will exist or not, potentially.
Agreed.
Yeah, I don't get why. It's a weird one. I don't get why people react like that. It's just like it's so unhelpful, objectively, immediately unhelpful. Anyway.
Yeah, agreed.
If you could start your career over again, is there anything you would do differently?
I grapple with that occasionally, and I usually come back to the fact that I like where I am, and I kind of had to be where I am, to walk the path that I walked to be where I am. So I would say no, but there are inevitably, I think anybody who thinks they can look back at the midpoint in their life where I consider myself without regrets is, I don't think, telling the truth, really, or it's an extraordinary situation. I think I've left jobs too quickly, so I urge people to have a little more patience when things aren't going right for them at a certain job, or maybe they've been passed over for a promotion. Don't be hasty, take your time a little bit. I've seen it play out, the cliche that the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. So, be careful and deliberate with changes in your career when you might choose to leave a certain job. Don't do so at a peak. So that's a lesson I've learned in my life.
I get where you're coming from. The devil you know is still the devil, though, I would just say. No, I think you're right. I mean, there's always, especially where there's a high emotion situation, as we've talked about already, but always sleep on it at least once or twice, I think, before you
stall for time.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to make any knee-jerk reactions when because it could have any number of unseen impacts on your career. That said, I've done the opposite in my career. I've left the job too slowly, and that's one of my biggest professional regrets. So, there's a middle ground somewhere, I'm sure. I agree. I don't know how you find it, though.
Yeah, if you have a blueprint, let me know. But I suspect it's different from everybody. Every situation's different. There's so many, variables.
Yeah. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's like most things, isn't it? It's what you can live with at the time. And as long as you're still sleeping at night and there's a roof over your head.
Agreed.
We can put up with a lot of things, can't we? Well, time's been flying and we've run through all these questions very quickly, I have to say. So I've only got one left, but it's my favorite one. So it's called Leadership Heroes.
Leadership Heroes.
So if you had to pick one person, but it could be literally anyone you can think of, so alive or dead, past or present, real or fictitious, but someone who, in your opinion, would perfectly embody leadership, who would that be for you and why?
Well, I think it would probably have to be General Stanley McChrystal. I never served under him, but I'm such an admirer based on the interactions I've had with him about somebody from such a vaunted background and position, the way he listens, the way he is able to take information from people in such different walks of life and synthesize that to grow from it. I've seen it firsthand. And then I've powerfully, because you never know if someone's just treating you in a certain way, I've heard it from people who've served under him. So a really extraordinary leader who knows how to listen. In my book, he describes himself, even though he was the commander, I think that was literally in his title, of all the joint forces in Afghanistan, he called himself more of an influencer. And I was like, you are literally a commander. So you literally tell people with guns to do certain things, including lethal action. But he felt that his role was to get people to think it was kind kind of their decision, and he was influencing their actions. So he created an environment in which people were thinking that they were empowered to make decisions, and he was subtly guiding them. So he's an extraordinary individual, and I would encourage your listeners to, look into him, buy his books, and dig in. He's a really powerful leader.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I have heard the name. So yeah, he's known here as well. It's interesting. So you talked earlier about the misconceptions we get about the world of spying from Hollywood and TV. And I think the same is true of the military and how they do leadership, because it's usually portrayed exactly that. It's like the shouty people, leading from the front, charging in first, like follow me over the hill, boys, that sort of thing. But I mean, I've interviewed quite a few veterans now on the podcast. I used to work with quite a lot in past career. And you have a conversation with those people who have served about leadership from both sides of the pond, actually. And invariably, like almost without exception, I think, they tell a story very opposite to the way we perceive it. So I feel like the ones who are really, really good at it have exactly that mindset. It's more about it's listening, collaboration, like working together, looking after each other. It's not about who shouts loudest or top down, all that other stuff, except maybe in very limited situations. So that's been a big lesson for me, I have to say.
Sounds like a good one to have learned. I agree with it.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy, I think we're at the end, I'm sad to say. It's been a very entertaining and interesting conversation. Thank you for being with us and for sharing all of your stories and insights. One final thing I will ask you, if anyone would like to know more about you, perhaps get a copy of your book or anything like that, where can they go? What are the links?
Yeah, thanks so much, David. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. My book, Sell Like a Spy, is available most places you buy book. It's, ebooks, Audible. I read the book. So for better or for worse, you'll have my voice there. I'm at selllikeaspy.net. If you want to learn more about me, read some stuff I've written, see examples of me speaking. And I always encourage people to connect to me on LinkedIn as well.
Lovely. And I'll put all of those links down in the show notes so people can find it easily.
Terrific.
Well, that's it. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
My pleasure, David. Thank you for having me.
Jeremy, thank you again so much for your time. Great conversation there. And it's touched on quite a few quite important topics that we don't always get into that much depth about when they come up, if they come up. So thank you for being with us. Great conversation. I certainly learned quite a few useful tips there. Listeners and viewers, if you would like to learn more about Jeremy, as always, you know where to go. Check those show notes, find the links to his website and his socials, reach out to him, learn more of the things, maybe get a copy of his book as well. If you are one of those new leaders who is struggling with the adjustment to leadership, to responsibility, perhaps confidence or imposter feelings are getting you down, setting you back, and you just don't quite feel like you're getting the most from your leadership and from your team. And if you're looking for support, and if you are in fact a science fiction fan, maybe even as big a one as I am, then do come along and join us at the Integrity Leaders online community. It's built for people like you, new to leadership, still struggling to make the adjustment, looking to expand your leadership skill set, learn how to be people first and lead with integrity. You've probably had a few bad bosses in your time and you don't want to go down that path. You don't want to replicate the poor leadership you've had to experience yourself. You want to be the leader you wish you had had. If any of that is ringing bells for you, then Integrity Leaders is the place for you. The link is on the screen and in the show notes. Don't forget as well, as a podcast listener, you can redeem an exclusive 50% off discount code, also on the screen and in the show notes. And I look forward to welcoming you aboard our virtual starship very soon. My LinkedIn details are also down there in the show notes. If you have any questions about the community before joining, please do reach out, drop me a message. Always happy to chat. Leadership, community, podcasting, you name it. I'll have a conversation about it. That's all we've got time for this week. Thank you so much for being with us. And I hope to see you again next week when we've got Dr. Tomas joining us to talk about his somewhat controversial views on the concept of authenticity. We'll also cover his latest book, the title of which is Don't Be Yourself. So maybe that's a bit of a spoiler. But anyway, you just have to come along and find out, won't you? And I will hopefully see you there. In the meantime, as always, be a leader, not a boss.